We have returned to resume our interview process. We have our last interviewee being prepared to come before us. Mr. Clerk, would you please call the roll call?
State Attorney Ehrenberg, Public Defender Howard, Commissioner Headley.
Here.
Commissioner Cridell.
Present.
Commissioner Lofredo.
Present.
Commissioner Priori.
Here.
Commissioner Smith-Gordon.
Here.
Inspector General Steckler.
Here.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Would you please state your full name?
My name is Theodore Raymond Stehney.
Stehney.
Yes.
Mr. Stehney, would you please give us the benefit of about 2 minutes of why you want the position as Inspector General in Palm Beach County, and give us some background in terms of your experiences as why you think you're qualified for the position?
Certainly. September 1st will mark 40 years of federal government service for me, which is a milestone, but I'm also nearing the end of my career. I maxed out my retirement shortly after that, and I've been looking at options to move forward. Last year's government shutdown was a good opportunity for me to reassess where I was in my working career. I've been on vacation the week before, and the government was shut down for a little over 2 weeks. And after the first week, my wife came home and she said, "Well, are you ready to retire?" And I said, "No, this convinced me I'm not ready to retire yet. I have too many hours to fill in a day, too many hours that I need to occupy." So that was, it was a good time for me to kind of reflect on where I was personally and, with my career. Combining the two of those, I've been keeping my eyes open for what is my next alternative. When you work in the IG community for your whole career, your options and how you can use your experience and training are really limited. I would have options where I could go to what we call the dark side. There are a lot of businesses out there that I could go and I could work, and I could, for a paycheck, trade my experience for things that would benefit them in how they could best deal with the government. You can't spend a whole career, on the side of doing the right thing and then just for a paycheck move over. So I consider my options limited. When I saw this opportunity come up, I thought that this was a great opportunity for me to continue my profession while not compromising the values that I have as an auditor, as a CPA, as a government employee.
Thank you so much. We have committee members from the IG Selection Committee members who have questions to ask of you. We will begin this time on this end with Commissioner Headley.
Hello.
Hello.
I have 3 short questions for you. Unique to this Office of Inspector General is a contract oversight unit which monitors procurement activities from pre-award through post-award. How would you allocate OIG staff and/or resources towards procurement activity?
That's a very good question. And one of the questions that I'll have for the panel later is, what makes that difficult is the organization is only staffed at 50%, which makes it even that much tougher that you only have half the resources to allocate. One of the first things that I would do is look at what the various components are, because there's also an investigations unit, and you have to balance the workload of each unit to the resources that you have, and then you have to triage them. You have to identify where the true vulnerabilities are with the organization and make the decisions based on that.
Okay, thank you. Second question, how would you approach community outreach in order to ensure that the public is aware and involved in the work of the IG?
I do know that currently the Inspector General does have a program where they go out and they speak at public meetings, and they're available to address any group within the jurisdiction of the OIG. I think that's a great program to have, and that's something that I would continue to foster and grow. I believe that I do see that the Inspector General has, I think it's bi-monthly briefings with the senior leadership of the various local jurisdictions. Again, I think that's another fine example of maintaining a relationship and building upon that to further the work of the Inspector General. Being in the Inspector General community, there's a fine line, because you have to be independent, but you also have to find a way to engage the individuals that you're auditing, investigating, and providing these services to. So I think those outreach programs, I would continue to offer opportunities for the public to get together with the OIG staff and myself, if I was selected, to continue and to build. The IG does have a hotline. In addition to complaints, I'm hoping that that hotline also gets suggestions from the community on ways to engage the OIG's activities with the community.
Okay. Now, if you are selected for this job, how will you hold yourself accountable to the citizens of Palm Beach County?
Well, first and foremost, I'm an employee of the citizens. I understand that. I have a role to play. The Inspector General reports to this commission here, but ultimately the IG serves the community, and you're there to protect the interests of the taxpayers. And I think that that's something that anyone in the IG community can never forget. You're here for the taxpayers. You're here to promote good government, open government.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Lafrera?
We have 41 jurisdictions here in Palm Beach County. Actually, 38 municipalities in additional jurisdictions. How would you conduct a risk assessment for these 41 jurisdictions?
The first thing that I would do is look at the budgets that flow through each of those jurisdictions. Funding is one of the core issues in providing oversight. You know, the tax dollars that go through there, that's where a lot of your vulnerability occurs, not only through the taxes they collect, but how they spend that money, the contracts they enter into. So looking at, I would look at past issues that have arisen out of each of those jurisdictions. Is it a well-run municipality or community, or is it one that's had its issues with problems in the past? We always learn from our past, and that's something that I've always used in doing these types of assessments. Look from the future and use that as a basis for going forward.
Okay, thank you. What would your annual audit plan focus on?
My annual audit plan, trying to get the right mix of audit work that addresses both the work at the county level as well as the jurisdictions. I did look at the budgets for the jurisdictions, and there's a wide variety of, budgets that flow through this, from some very large to some very small. We always tend to concentrate our efforts on the biggest dollars, but we can never lose sight of the smaller units, because those can be just as vulnerable to the waste, to the potential frauds. But I would really have to go in and do some additional research and look at, past results, and then start making some hard decisions on, there are very scarce resources available, how to best utilize those to get the maximum bang for the buck for the citizens.
Thank you.
Sir, please describe when you have had a difficult exchange with the public. What steps did you take, and what personal skill sets did you draw upon to resolve the situation?
Being an auditor my whole career, quite often there are issues that are brought up that don't play well. Now, most of the issues that I've dealt with at the federal level, it hasn't necessarily been issues with the public, but a couple of years ago, the GSA-OIG uncovered, we were asked to look into a conference in Las Vegas. Now, while this wasn't necessarily issues involving the public, what it did was it cast a bad light on GSA and the federal government interconference spending, and the misuses of federal monies and the abuses. In dollar terms, it wasn't a whole lot of money. It was about $800,000, and trust me, that's a lot of money. But when you have billions of dollars going through an agency, that wouldn't be considered material in a financial statement audit. But it was material because of the effects that it had on how the public and how the elected officials viewed the agency, viewed its management and its decision-making. As a result of that, we had to do, my staff in particular had to do a lot of work on looking at past conference spending over a 5-year period and kind of triage that while we still were maintaining our additional workload and trying to strike a fine balance between keeping our legislators happy and providing them the answers that they needed.
Okay, and what experience do you have with working with, what experience do you have working with multiple entities? Please, in answering that question, include examples of what strategies you employed for successful interactions.
Certainly. One of the programs that my office oversees, we provide assistance to the Department of Justice, and it's a program called the QUITOM, where somebody can file a lawsuit against a company, the government can intervene, and basically it's when somebody has what they feel is insider information on somebody defrauding the government. My staff does the lion's share of the work, and these cases can take anywhere from 4 years to sometimes as long as 8 to 10 years from cradle to grave. So a lot of work goes in, but a big payout so far our largest single recovery settlement with DOJ was $199.5 million from Oracle Corporation. Now, we're doing all this work, but we're also working jointly with the Department of Justice, who it's their case, we're only providing assistance, but it's my audit resources. We also work with our investigators who have a role in doing the interviews and looking at the potential criminal wrongdoing that may be involved in these cases. You're welcome.
Thank you. Commissioner Craig.
Want to talk about money?
Certainly.
Good. Funding is an issue, and you've done enough research, from what I can tell, that you know that funding for this particular agency has been a little tricky
Yes.
at best, and that it has created limitations on what they've been able to do. So one of the major challenges to whoever will succeed General Steckler will be dealing with the funding issue. So the question really is, what do you think, that being in the position, but just based on what you've learned through public and publicly available information, what would you do to address the funding issue going forward?
Well, my first hope would be that the county would prevail in the lawsuit and the organization would be fully funded,
Okay.
which makes it a lot easier to fully staff the OIG and then to provide the services accordingly. If it's not, if the county doesn't prevail and staffing is limited, it's going to be extremely hard to meet the mandate of, covering the county and 38 to 40 additional organizations when you're only at half staff. Something is going to suffer, and it may be a hard call on where you devote those very few limited resources you have to what is the most significant vulnerability that you feel that you have and how you address it.
Okay, I think it's a fair statement. Let's talk about one of the ways that the agency reaches out, and some of the ways that it's touched, which is through media. What kind of experience, what's your depth or breadth of experience in dealing with the media in your previous IG positions?
In my previous IG positions, for the bulk of my career, we weren't permitted to have contact with the press. That changed for me about 8 years ago. And I have to tell you, the first time, it was uncomfortable. But the more I did it, the more comfortable I got. And what I find is if you're honest and open with people, you don't have any issues. Tell the press what you can tell them, and don't be afraid to tell them what you cannot tell them. And a lot of the work that the IG does has to be protected, at least during the working stages of it. So, don't be afraid to say what you can't say. We deal with this all the time, even in Congress, who, they feel that because they're on an oversight committee that they should have the right to everything. But certain cases, we just can't tell them. There are laws that prevent that. And most times when you sit and if you can articulate why certain information is being withheld or why you're telling them what you can tell them, they tend to accept that.
Okay. You've kind of answered my second question that I'm going to follow up with anyway, because you partially defined it. Relative to the objectives, the outcomes of dealing with the media, what would you think would be your first priority as to a created outcome from dealing with media?
My first priority would be hopefully to establish good media relations and to do my best to make that happen, keeping in mind that the public and their perception of the OIG is going to be based on what they hear, and the bulk of what they hear is coming from the media. So, I would have to find a way to establish, maintain good media relations to make sure that the proper message is getting out there, and to have trust and faith when they don't like what they're hearing, that they at least understand it. And, we don't always have to agree, but we should always respect each other.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sir, I'd like to ask you, what is your management style and philosophy?
My management style is I lead by example. And my philosophy is that I think that an organization needs to be trained, and you need to hire the best, most competent individuals you can find. And then we need to make sure that we're cross-trained, so that if somebody is out for an extended period of time, or they win the lottery or something like that, that they can be replaced without any real effect on the operations of the organization. I had an unfortunate occurrence a few years ago when one of my children was in an auto accident. And I left out of there to the hospital, and I didn't go back to the office for about 2.5 weeks. The only ones that knew what happened were my immediate supervisors. The rest of the country, and I was in an operational unit where we supported the operations of the Office of Audits nationwide. The unit kept on operating because everybody was cross-trained, everybody knew their jobs, and everybody was able to fill in. And one of my goals in any position I've ever had is when I leave that position, it should be able to operate seamlessly. If it does, I've done my job. I remember when I first started, people, they kept knowledge to themselves because knowledge was power. You know, I don't subscribe to that. You have to share, you have to be able to delegate. Otherwise, you end up running an organization by yourself, and nobody, no matter how good you are, can do that.
Okay. I think you've answered my next question, but I'm going to offer it to you anyway. The position is responsibility for several business units and functions. Describe in your own words in detail your management technique for staying on top of the multiple programs, ensuring that goals and deadlines are met. You pretty much touched on it, but I'd like for you to elaborate a little bit more, if you could.
Certainly. In my current position, I have 10 offices located throughout the country. I have a staff right now because of budgeting. We have budget issues at the federal level also. My staffing is done at about 140, but we've got budgeting authority now to hire about 32 more people. So I see a little relief in sight there. But we have work to do for both providing the audit oversight. We support the Department of Justice. I have all the personnel issues. At any one time, I have at least 15 or 20 balls that have to be up in the air, and I have to be focused on all of them. To do that, I have to rely on my managers to be doing their job. I have to make sure that they're doing it. I can never sit back and just blindly assume that somebody's doing their job, but I have to trust that they're going to do it. And oftentimes, if you find that somebody isn't doing their job, then you need to deal with it. You need to find a way to get them to do their job, or sometimes you have to replace them. But to keep any organization running efficiently and effectively, you know, the leader needs to lead, but you have to make sure that the subordinates are doing their job, and you have to delegate and trust that they'll do it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, Mr. Stehney. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Did I pronounce it correctly, Stehney?
Stehney, yes.
Stehney, great. Just want to ask about the independence of the IG. How do you maintain that?
Oh, there's independence. First of all, it's a requirement of the profession. The GAO Yellow Book requires independence. And we have a pretty thorough process where every year our staff must sign statements of independence. Before each project, they must review the project and again state that they have nothing that impairs their independence on that particular project. Now, that's just the yearly process that we do internally with our staff to ensure compliance with the Yellow Book requirement for independence. We provide online training to our staff at least on a yearly basis to go over issues that deal with independence. We have each year the staff has to file a financial disclosure statement that's reviewed by our lawyers.
What about this office? Would you do the same thing here?
Yes, I would. You know, independence is one of the pillars of the audit and the IG community. It's fundamental. Without independence, you have nothing.
And how do you separate friendships from those under your jurisdiction? And then if you could also speak to the working relationship you'll have with the state attorney's office.
Certainly. One of the hardest things to maintain is both a professional and a personal relationship with people. When it comes to balancing those, you know, it always has to go towards the organization. The personal relationship can never take precedence over a professional one. As a supervisor, you always have to be mindful of that. In part of our standards of conduct, we talk about not only the impairments, but also the appearance. If I constantly go to lunch and I socialize with one subordinate, whether there's anything going on, there's at least the appearance, and that alone affects the independence of that group. I would view working with the state attorney very similar to working with both our Office of Investigations and when we work with the Department of Justice in my current position. As the head of audits, we review a lot of material, and quite often we find through the course of auditing situations that we feel may warrant further review because we suspect there might be some type of either civil or criminal wrongdoing there. The first thing we always do is sit down with our investigators and talk to them. And we lay out what our suspicions are. We talk to them, and then the first question is, are you interested in it? And if you are, do you want us to continue our audit work, or do you want us to step down? Because quite often, you know, if you continue audit work in an area where there is some criminal wrongdoing, you can jeopardize the prosecution of that case. So as soon as we feel that there's an issue, we sit down, we talk about it. We get the investigators' opinion on whether they want us to stand down or continue working. They also will tell us, we like what you have, but this is what we need. When you get this, bring it back to us, we'll be ready to move. So we have that constant interaction. And a lot of the work that our investigative unit gets comes from the audit staff. So we have a very close working relationship with them. I would assume that the Inspector General has that same working relationship with the state's attorney. And I think that would be, you know, a relationship that has to continue to grow. You're welcome.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
What skills do you think are most important for an IG, and what is it in your past experience that has enabled you to develop that skill?
The skills to be an IG, you have to, I believe, have to understand all the facets of what makes up an Inspector General's office. It's not just an auditing, it's not just an investigative, it's not just a contract oversight group. You have to understand it all and how the different pieces come together. Throughout my long storied career, you know, I was on detail to our investigative staff for about 2.5 years in a white-collar crime case. I testified in front of a grand jury. I was an agent of the grand jury. So I understand personally working on a very in-depth case that ended up in some, you know, convictions. You know, so I have experience on that side. I also, in my current job, work very closely with our head of investigations so that, you know, we keep abreast of what's going on in both the audit and the investigative side. One of the things that my staff routinely does when we do an audit of a contractor, we look to see if the investigators have an open case on it. Because us going in and just doing a routine audit with a case going on could jeopardize that case. So there has to be a very close relationship, but the Inspector General needs to be needs to understand all those aspects of it. If you're going to run the organization, you have to have a thorough grounding of the various components that comprise it.
What key challenges will the next Palm Beach County Inspector General face, and what course of action would you take to address those challenges?
I think the single biggest challenge is staffing and how to proceed if the budget issue isn't resolved in favor of fully funding the Office of Inspector General. Then how do you manage a workload that extensive with only half the people to do it? That is going to be a huge challenge, and I would hope that this commission would offer some input and some insights into it. But
what are your thoughts on how to meet that challenge?
I'm actually hoping that there is a positive outcome and the organization is fully funded. Otherwise, if I was selected for the position, my staff and I would have to sit down with the board and probably with all the local jurisdictions and have maybe a 1 or 2 day meeting to discuss, it's time to be real now. You want the service, you need the service, but how are we going to fund it? Are there any other avenues to do this?
Okay, thank you.
So this concludes the formal interview questions. Committee members perhaps have some follow-up questions
Certainly.
for you. Are there any follow-up questions?
No questions.
Commissioner Lafredo?
No.
Commissioner Pardo?
Yep. You've spoken a lot. There's been a consistent theme through many of your answers, which deals with delegation.
Yes.
And I'm a big fan of delegation. But what I would ask you, because everyone has a different perspective on it, what is the goal of delegation for you? What is your goal for delegation, not necessarily what Fortune magazine would say?
Well, my goal for delegation is I want to enable my staff to do their job, do it effectively, do it efficiently, getting the proper oversight and support from me that they need, but letting them do their job. I've seen so many times when people come in and when people move up the ladder, they don't want to give up the jobs that they were good at. Being the IG, I'm not the auditor anymore. I'm not the audit manager. I have to let my auditors audit. I have to give them the tools, the training, and everything that they need to be effective at that. So I need to delegate down to them. I need to delegate to the audit manager, the person running the audit office, the abilities to run that organization under my leadership. But they must keep me informed. Ultimately, the buck stops with me. Anything that happens in my organization, whether I know about it or not, sits on my shoulders.
Right.
I accept that, I understand that, and I never forget that. I constantly remind my staff of that, Whether I knew about it or not, if it happened on my watch, it's on me.
Right. A lot of managers will delegate what they want to, not what they should. And I think there's a big difference between delegation and abdication. And I think you've described it pretty well. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, sir. As part of the process of the IG, peer review credentialing is very important. How are you prepared to handle that issue relative to dealing with the Joint Commission on Accreditation? And do you have background and knowledge in doing so? And how would you do so?
Not from that aspect. I've never gone through a law enforcement peer review. However, I've gone through every 3 years, I go through a peer review of my audit organization by another inspector general. and every 3 years my office does a peer review of one. So I'm very well versed in the peer review process. I'm a big supporter of it because it ensures that my organization is following standards and that we don't get lax, and that it gives that assurance to those outside that you always hear, who's watching the watchdog? Well, it's the peer review that does that. So I'm a very strong advocate of peer reviews, and I did read up a little bit on the recent accreditation of the investigative staff here, and I think it's going to be up for a renewal in approximately a year. And they're already starting to pull those things together. My question is, I know there's no legal requirement right now for the audit operation to be peer reviewed, but I believe there are other inspector generals at county levels, and I would advocate that we establish something that we peer review ourselves at the audit level also.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sir, what tools would you utilize to investigate an accusation of fraud?
What tools would well, again, if it was dealing with an investigative issue, and normally if you're talking potential fraud, it would, to me, fall under the investigations. If the auditors find it, I would expect they would refer it to the investigators. So the first thing you want to do is look at the allegation, and you want to get as much information as you can to see whether there's any substance to it or not. And then you've got to start looking at it to make some determinations as far as, did the accusations occur? Are they factual? Are they misplaced? Quite often you get complaints for a lot of different reasons, unsuccessful bidders or people that are unhappy over it. So the first you got to do is review it to make sure that, do you have something legitimate? If you feel that you have something that is criminal in nature, I believe that the next step is to refer it to the state attorney's office. But in how you ascertain that, you get as much information as you can. If people call in with a hotline complaint, hopefully they didn't do it anonymously, and you can interview the people, get as much information as you can from them. And what else do they have in addition to what they made in their allegation that will give you additional areas to review and to research? You've got to look at the laws, you've got to look at the regs to see, is that even a violation? Was there anything illegal about that action? Once you gather all your information, you do your fact-finding, you'll come to a conclusion that, yes, it had merit, or no, it doesn't. If it had merit, then you move it to the next step, whether it's to the state attorney's office or to, I don't know if you get involved with the local police or how you do it, but I'm sure there's a process for moving those forward. If you find that it doesn't have merit, or if the state attorney says handled administratively, then we would take whatever recourse is there to address it at that point.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Yes, state attorney?
Yes, thank you.
Danberg.
Thank you. A couple quick ones. First, you would relocate here, right, if you got the job?
Yes, I would.
Great, thank you. And then secondly, can you just very briefly tell them about your priorities as it applies to inefficiency versus waste, fraud, and abuse? What would be your top priority?
They would be floating right there at the top, and there might be a different one on any given day. You want to always address inefficiency so that you're getting the best use of the funding, but you always want to be alert to the fraud, waste, and abuse. And I think that those kind of are right up there, and it's like, which of your 4 children do you love the most? That one is a hard one for me to pick, because one day it might be fraud, the next day it might be inefficiency. But, you know, I think you have to respect them all and treat them all accordingly. And I'm not sure it would be fair for me to say I would just champion one at the expense of the others.
One more question for you, sir.
Certainly.
You indicated that you hoped that that this office is funded.
Yes.
In case the office is not funded and we're left with the funds that we have now, could you run this office?
Yes.
How?
I would run it with the staffing they have, and it would be a very tight budget. There would be fewer jobs that were being done. There would be fewer resources that could be devoted to each of the organizations. So it would be a belt tightening or continuing to run. I think they've already tightened their belt. They're already operating on that. It would be continuing to maintain that type of operation until the issue is resolved. But the question that I would have for these organizations, you want to be part of it. You want to get the benefits from it. You know, how do you expect to get those if you're not willing to help fund the organization?
Thank you very much. At this time, you have an opportunity to ask members of the dais any questions that you may have.
Okay, well, my first few questions I think I've already beat pretty much to a pulp, which dealt with the funding and those issues and what happens if it is risen funded. And I'm assuming there hasn't been any resolution to the court proceeding. I'm not sure it's even been scheduled yet. But I did have a couple of other quick questions, and it really comes down to jurisdiction of the Inspector General. Now, I did see in the annual report that was just filed mention that the audit unit continues to coordinate with Palm Beach County Internal Auditor. Now, I'm curious about the Internal Auditor, how big that organization is, and how the two interact and where their jurisdiction lies, because I went as far as to see that on the website, the Internal Auditor has authority to audit solid waste and the healthcare districts. Yet I did see that the OIG at one time had independent contracts with both those to provide services. So,
if you would allow, I will have our current Inspector General answer that question.
Internal audit, they have a shop here in the county. There's, I'm estimating around 6 staff. Specifically for the county. They used to, before we were here, contract with Solid Waste Authority for a particular audit, not for a 3-year contract like we have. So we've sort of taken over that piece. Healthcare District is on their own these days. And then each of the 38 municipalities, there's only a couple, 2 or 3, that actually have an internal audit. One actually has a staff of about 6, and one is a single person. So there's not that much internal audit in the municipalities. But there's clearly one here in the county. And we have to coordinate with them because we don't want to duplicate the services.
Exactly. Now, did you ever have any instances where there were issues with duplication?
Well, considering we only have 5 auditors and they have 6 auditors and we have 41 jurisdictions, we have not had that issue yet.
Understood. Thank you.
You have time for one more question?
Okay. The other question I had, it probably is more goes to the Inspector General again, but implementation of issues. Is it up to the audited, investigated organization whether or not they want to accept them? Is there anything that compels them to have to, for the IG and the audited investigative unit, to have to sit down and reach an agreement on an issue?
As far as a complaint coming in, or help me understand what your question is?
An audit report, I did see one where they implemented so many, they're in the process of implementing some, and 1 or 2 they're not implementing. Do they have to negotiate that with you, or is there any any body above the jurisdictions in the IG, like the final resolution official that says, I side with the IG on that one, or I side with the organization?
Typically what happens is if we make multiple recommendations, and some of these reports have been multiple, like 20, and they do 18 of them, and 2 of them really, because of the 18, either they don't need to do them anymore, or they've come up with a very simple solution that they're not exactly taking our recommendation. We may say that's not implemented from our direct recommendation, but they've implemented enough. So that's just a continued conversation with the government so that we're comfortable that they've done what they said they were going to do.
But they are required to take appropriate action that you're willing to accept or
They're not required, no. It's a voluntary, but most of the government entities do actually take the recommendations.
At this time, sir, you have an opportunity to give us your closing statement of why you think that you're the best qualified for this position.
Well, thank you. First, I want to thank the Commission for granting me this interview. I look at this as an opportunity for me to continue to do what I've spent a lifetime doing. That's being a public service in an Inspector General community. I think my background lends itself very well from running an audit organization. Prior to that, I put together at the request of the Inspector General a forensic auditing unit. And that was the Inspector General was unhappy that his investigative unit was always reactive, and he wanted something proactive. And he asked me to look into a forensic auditing unit, and I put it together and ran it for about 2 years before I was promoted to my current position. It's been very successful. I've worked in all aspects at the federal level, both in investigations, audit, GSA. Its 2 primary business lines are procurement. It's procurement arm for the civilian government, and it's the landlord. I think those are 2 of the primary functions that Palm Beach County does. They enter a lot of contracts, and they own and manage a lot of real estate. So I think my experience from the federal transitions very well to what Palm Beach County, has to be overseen. I wish you luck in your decision, and looking forward to hearing your response. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. We applaud you for filing your application and traveling to West Palm Beach for consideration. Have a great day.
Thank you.
At this time, we will be on the agenda. We're at the public comment. I think, just a second. I'm sorry. Can I? No, we don't have them. We have some, but we don't have them all. Do we have an agenda? Oh, here it is. Thank you. Well,
Can I?
no, we took matters out of order earlier.
Madam Chair?
Yes, yes, Inspector General.
That wasn't me, but
That-
okay.
I think,
I'm sorry.
that's okay. I'm just wondering if, it seems like the next step is to get review the written exercises, but we haven't gotten the additional ones. Maybe we can change the schedule to take the break now while they copy the rest of the exercises. Oh, they've got some. We still have to get Mr. Stehney's, and so.
He did his.
Oh, we have his too?
He did his already.
Excellent. So we can get those and take a minute?
We could. We have people.
Great.
We have 3 people for public comment. Would you mind taking those? Okay.
Yeah.
Any objection to that? Okay. Good. First, Ms. Alexandra Lawson. There will be 3 minutes for each person giving public comment.
Thanks.
Ms. Lawson, would you please state your full name and your address? Yeah.
Is this, do you want me to go to the other podium, or do you have a microphone?
See over there. Oh, they're both on?
Hello? No.
Try to flip that switch again. It might, okay, she's running.
That's how I fix it.
You got it now? It's not on. They're not on.
We hear you fine. I just don't know if it's going to be recorded.
It should be recorded.
I don't.
Oh, I think it should be. Absolutely. Public comment, we've sat here all day, and I think our public comments are just as viable.
I just want to make sure you heard on the record. What about right here in the front? You get front and center.
Is there one underneath?
Well, Ms. Larson. That one's not on. Ms. Larson, the one in the blue chair where the candidates were sitting, we know that one was working.
Sometimes there's a microphone under here. Does it work? Hello? Oh, well.
Here, it'll probably be easier if you don't mind coming up front.
Thank you so much.
We should have let Jess speak first. He's a commissioner.
I went in order, I know.
Does that go for you?
Yes.
There you go. All right. I want everybody to remember why the Inspector General was voted for. It was because of this dais. We had 4 convicted felons in this county. That's why the voters came out. And during the years of the Inspector General, you know, I have been doing this for 10 years without pay. I come down and question the consent agenda and every dollar we spend. This year alone, we're $41 million short. $41 million. That's the number. That was just on Tuesday, just 2 days ago. So, I mean, I'm not impressed by worrying about money or can you do the job, because all you have to do is read a county commission consent agenda to question the money in this county. It's very simple. I read it, and I come down here and speak on it. So that's the thing. The thing that concerned me today was hearing that we were customers. We're not. Elected officials, appointed officials, and hired county employees are public servants. But we are not customers, and this is not a corporation. It is a government entity. And those are where my concerns lie, because throughout the years I've been heard it called a business. And like I said, when I walked in the door into this room the very first time, I said, oh my God, we're in trouble. And everybody told me, well, they never do anything about it. And it changed. The world changed a little bit, and it needs to continue to change in this county. So hopefully, as you're listening to the applicants that are vying for the Inspector General job, because I met with Cheryl the first time when she got hired, and I told her exactly what I'm telling you today. The consent agenda is where we spend our money. And yes, there are 41 entities, but we also have taken on incredible debt in this county. Solid Waste Authority is one of them, a giant incinerator, which we're going to have to pay for, and now we have to take trash from other counties to make it viable. These are the things that I want my Inspector General to do. I want them to find the stuff I find on a weekly basis, and it's very, very simple. So hopefully that direction will come from the Commission on Ethics and this board. You will find that, and you will get there, because we're not there yet. But as far as not having enough money, I don't have enough money to do what I do. So do you think I have a lot of sympathy for that? None at all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Jess Santamaria. Think front and center, yes, sir.
Yeah, we're going to go down to the big table.
Thank you. My statements are based on my 41 years in Palm Beach County, both as a very active participant in government and business affairs. The first thing I'd want to do is thank each and every one of you for doing what you're doing. I hope you realize how important your job is. I mean, you're doing, to me, one of the most important jobs needed in Palm Beach County today. 1.3 million people should thank you in Palm Beach County for what you're doing. It's really extremely important what you're doing now and what you will be continuing to do as you serve. Currently, nothing is more important in Palm Beach County than the effectivity of the Office of Inspector General. The effectiveness of the Office of Inspector General automatically benefits many other important areas in the county, such as the budget. If the Office of Inspector General is effective, the county budget is helped in cutting fraud, in cutting waste, and making the county more efficient. Nothing is more important than that function. Others are important, but these are at least equally important. In my opinion, all of those who spoke before you today, this morning and this afternoon, I've been watching this morning on TV. I've been impressed with all of the candidates. You chose 7 good people. And I personally would support anyone you select, because they have the background and the qualifications to be effective. However, for them to be effective, I hope you and everybody else involved will provide them the 2 tools that are absolutely necessary for the Office of Inspector General to be effective. And we really know what those 2 tools are. The 2 tools are 100% independence and full adequate funding so that they can do their job. Unfortunately, Cheryl Steckler did not have 100% independence. She did not have proper funding. At best, it was 50% funding. And at best, it was maybe 80% independence. It's like sending someone to fight a battle with one hand tied behind their back. It's like sending a soldier to the battlefield with a BB gun. At best, she was given a .22 caliber weapon. No, she needs at least a 38 Magnum. But she just did not have the tools to do the job. I was pleasantly surprised she accomplished what she accomplished under the circumstances she was in.
Commissioner,
Yes.
in fairness to all of our citizens who must speak, I must limit you and ask you to conclude your comments.
Yes, she must be given the independence and the proper funding. The thing that has, this is the most important probably part of what I'm going to say. I hope you give me a few seconds to, because I think this is the most important. The grand jury recommended 1/4% vendor fee. All 7 commissioners, after thorough discussion with the public, everybody said it should be funded by vendor fees, 0.25%. The county commissioners, in their wisdom, improved on Miami-Dade. Miami-Dade was limited to 1/4%. This ordinance that we have allows us to go up to a little bit higher. If there's a shortage, it allows to go higher to properly fund the Inspector General. Why are we not following the grand jury, the 7 commissioners who voted twice to use the vendor fee? The public was told, and they voted overwhelmingly, 72+%, to use vendor fees. Why are we up to today, 3.5 years later, still using taxpayers' money? That was not the recommendation of the grand jury. It was not what the 7 commissioners voted on. It was not what the public voted on. It's supposed to be funded by vendor fees. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Santamaria, we do have a question by Ms. Howard.
And Commissioner, first, I just want to thank you. You have been involved in this issue, interested in this issue from the beginning, and I'm very, very appreciative of it. So why aren't we funding it through vendor fees?
You need to ask that. You need to ask that question.
Of who?
Whoever is. I don't understand it. We even gave dates. After, first it was that it was going to cost a lot of money for changing the billing system. Then I said, have a loan, and we can then get the loan repaid by the vendor fees at a later date. So then we agreed, again we voted, to say, we said October 1, 2011, we were supposed to begin charging the vendor fees. And after a year, again, it was not being done. So finally, I asked our administrator, Bob Weisman, and our legal attorney, and said, oh, because of the lawsuit. So it's one excuse after another. I would like the 7 of you to demand a real answer to that question. I really have not gotten what I consider a convincing answer. That's why we're having all of these problems with the funding. That was, again, final statement. That's what the grand jury recommended. That's what Miami-Dade is doing. That's what we all voted twice unanimously. That's what the public was told was going to happen. That's what they voted on, and we're still not doing it today. That's a question that must be answered.
Do you have any other questions, Commissioner Howard?
No, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The last public comment that I have here, if there are any others, please bring them forward. Ann Cole. Kuhl. Ma'am, would you please pronounce your full name and give us
My name is Ann Kuhl.
Okay.
Now I get the full effect of what these people went through today. As a member of the public, I want to thank you myself and for all the effort that you have put forth to get to this point, because I know there's a lot of hours that went before this. But I do want to say that there is one person probably today that you need to pick, and you need to, everyone has the qualifications, otherwise they couldn't get to this point to have the interview. But you need to look into their soul and choose the right one, the one that can do the job, the one that wants the job, for the right reasons. Somebody that is honest, reputable, and is going to serve all the citizens of this county. This is a big job, and I hope and pray that you're going to pick the right person. It's a big responsibility. And I also hope that the Inspector General position, from the day this person is hired, truly becomes independent, because they are not. You cannot be a county department and be also the Inspector General. You have to have your own attorneys. You cannot have the county attorney representing the Inspector General and also the people that she is to investigate, possibly investigate. It's a conflict. The rules that have been created are not correct, and they need to be worked on. And for the person that does get picked, they need the support and the proper rules to be truly independent. And I hope that that's going to happen. And I think the best thing that could happen to this county is for this lawsuit to just go away. I worked for Palm Beach County. I was tasked with collecting the 0.25% in the purchasing department. We were never asked to come up with a custom enhancement. I worked in IT. We were to make this enhancement work for anybody that owned the same software package that we had. If we would have had a custom enhancement, the price would not have been so high. That was never asked of us. I personally called Miami-Dade. They have their own homegrown system. They just made a little switch where you check a box on the contract, and it will automatically take the 0.25%. I, for the life of me, do not understand why, when I retired 2 weeks before the Inspector General came on board, that all the work that was done before to manually collect it in preparation for it to be implemented was pushed aside. Those questions need to be asked. We need to get to the end of this lawsuit, because the lawsuit is, the funding is the key. If the taxpayers now have to pay for it, it could break the back of the Inspector General. And that may be the ultimate goal. It needs to change.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have one more, Mr. David Baker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is David Baker. I am a member of the Palm Beach County Ethics Initiative and have been since 2008 and was one of the original members. Today's hearing public comment has been a walk down memory lane for me, since those same statements have been made numerous times in the past, and I'm not discounting any of them, just not sure that this is the right place to be making them. I think that's probably at the Board of County Commissioners meeting. One thing that the speaker just before me said that I would like to emphasize is that one of the important things for the new Inspector General was a relationship that unfortunately took a long time for the current Inspector General to develop, and that's a relationship with this group, because this group is the one that in 4 years will have to decide the extension of the Inspector General's contract that you hire, and the group that meets twice a year to hear reports from the Inspector General. And I think in order to make the most of those occasions, meeting with the Inspector General, getting to understand what that office does, and appreciating the references on her website and on the Inspector General's website are critical to, number one, a fair evaluation, and number two, a good understanding of the semi-annual reports that she'll be making to you. And I'm sorry, that's a little off point. This is the rest I will promise to keep to the point. When I'm looking at the candidates, I look at them with some boxes to tick. The boxes that I tick for them are transparency, independence, the ability to develop professional relationships, the ability to communicate internally and externally, the willingness, in fact, the positive search for accountability, and in the case of this Inspector General coming in, the ability to hit the ground running. The Inspector General we have did a wonderful job in establishing the groundwork for this office, from nothing to a functioning office that's fully accredited for all the things it's supposed to be doing. So I would ask you, when you are looking at the candidates that you've already interviewed today, to think about those points: transparency, independence, the ability and willingness to develop professional relationships, internal and external communications, the willingness to be accountable and to search for ways to be accountable, and the ability to hit the ground running. We were blessed. I think county staff did a wonderful job in winnowing through the applications, and you did a great job winnowing through the applications to come up with the 7 people you interviewed. They're capable. Only 1 or 2 ticked all my boxes, and I confess that I did not hear 3 of them, and I'm sorry for that. I wish I could be here all day, because this does mean a lot to me. But from what I've heard, you've got some very good candidates, and I hope that you'll agree with me and consider the boxes that I ticked when I listened to them. And I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Comments? Well, we thank you
Thank
for
you.
the efforts that you have put forth to make all of this and being part of this to make this possible. So thank you. And we're here to help sustain ethics reform in Palm Beach County.
Thank you.
At this time, commissioners, committee members, we do have the reports, but I'd like to take a brief recess. Can you give me 7? Okay. All right. We'll come back. So 7 minutes, just a quick recess, please. To review these, then we'll be back. We're in recess. Is everyone back? No. Here's Dave. Oh, I'm sorry. You're sitting back. I couldn't see you. We returned from our recess. We're back on the record live. I don't think we need to take another roll call. Do we? Okay, so everybody's present. Everyone's here. We have decided earlier the method in which we're going to vote. If I'm correct, please correct me if I'm incorrect. We're going to place on one sheet of paper our top 3 choices, write out the names of the persons, and rate them numerically with 1, 2, 3, 3 being the highest number. Is that correct, Ms. Shawn?
3 being the highest number? No, 1 is not.
1 is not. Well, that's why I'm asking for clarification. Ranking. Is that correct? Or the reverse?
3 points for 1.
3 points for number 1. Yeah. We got it. Okay. I think.
Do we put our names on this paper?
Yes.
How's this work?
Do you want it anonymous?
No.
No, it needs to be
We're
public.
just going to collect them and tally them. But
No, my question is, do we place our names on the paper so that we, thank you. No.
is this off? We're back on. Good. What we discussed this morning in the orientation was that each of you independently would give us your top 3 choices for the position based on everything. You've all received copies of the written as well that was completed today. In addition to that, you have the interview responses to consider. And we're looking for the number 1 candidate, the top candidate at the end of the day is number 1. Then number 2 would be your second choice. And number 3, your third choice candidate or third place candidate in the performance today. If you wish to weight them, which we had talked again about this morning, it would be a weighting of 3 points for the number 1 candidate, 2 points for the number 2 candidate, and 1 point allotted for anyone in the third place. And we put our names on there, and we will collect that from you, and we'll tally it, and we can announce the results, or the chair can announce the results.
Can I already folded this? It's not anonymous. There you go. Thank you. Ms. Shawn, do we need to stand in recess while you tabulate that? No? Okay.
Madam Chair, I just want to thank you for your hard work in sharing the meeting and your leadership. And I think this was a long but I think important process, and I think we'll come up to a good result. Yeah, and congratulations to the committee. I was impressed with all 7 individuals.
Thank you. Thank you.
And to staff for all the hard work.
Yes, staff did a lot of work. And thank you, Inspector General Steckler, for being up here with us on the dais. Okay. Well, Member, I also want to publicly thank the person who, the entity, I don't know what office it came from, who delivered lunch to us. Department of Public Affairs, thank you. We do have a verdict, at least in part. Well, unanimously, we have selected one person. And that person, well, when I say unanimously, is it? Minus one. Yeah, so almost unanimously. Yes, yes. That person is Mr. Carey. He received a total of 19 points. Then we have a three-way tie. And the three-way tie, actually, this part is important. We wish that we could just say, yes, we have that one person and we go home. But in the spirit of ensuring that we don't need to come back here, because the contract negotiations still have to, be underway. We want to make sure that the candidate that we have selected is going to accept whatever the terms are of the contract, and it's going to be concluded. So we need to have a secondary person or an alternative, better yet, a plan B. Okay? So it's between, and that's 7 votes, just to let you know. There were 7 votes for the three-way tie. I'm about to, they totaled the number. Remember, we rated them. We rated them by 3-1. Carrie, why you?
Well, because if it wasn't a tie, would Mr. Carey still be number one?
He's number one no matter. He's my king.
That's what but what's that? Okay.
Yes. Okay.
I'm sorry, let me hear this again. What is that?
Tell you what, why don't you go to that mic there? It's on now. I learned how to turn it on during recess.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to find out.
19 points was what Mr. Carey received based on the weighted scores of first, second, and third place voting. The next highest score is the three-way tie that our chair was referring to. So there are 3 people who are tied with 7 points as a result of their rankings.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Before I announce these, I do have one question because it looks like the same name was written twice. It looks like Stehney. I know that, but it looks like it's twice written. Okay. I just want to, maybe I'm not reading your writing properly. Oh. Don't go there. Ah.
There is. It is a 1-point difference.
Palm Beach County does it again. Thank you.
Yeah, somebody had given them a first name and allowed.
I tell you what. Do you need to correct? Go ahead.
Correct it.
Thank you. Take your time. Okay. While the candidates are being retabulated for accuracy, whomever is the selected candidate, just wanted to put on public record that it will, by ordinance, it shall be the county attorney's, the human resource,
You're talking about the Inspector General contract?
Yeah.
That'll be the chair of the Ethics Commission unless you designate somebody else, and you'll work with the Inspector General and the County Attorney's Office.
and there's a human resource.
And then they'll coordinate with their Human Resources Department.
All right. And I will not relinquish my duties. I am in for the long run, so I will. Yeah. And then what happens is we will negotiate that, hopefully complete that, and on May 15th, as a friendly reminder, those of us who are on the Commission of Ethics, with the exception of the absence of Vice Chair Cridell, unless he is going to end up being in town, then we will welcome you to come. We will come back as a unit to vote on that said contract so that it can then go before the Palm Beach County Board of County Commissioners for the, I believe it's the June 5th County Commission meeting for their final approval.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
over here.
Oh, I'm
I just have a question as to who notifies the winning candidate.
It will be me.
Good. It should be. That's what I was hoping.
Yes. Thank you. I think this properly, it will be I, but okay. Okay.
We did have Stehney twice listed.
Yes.
So that moved him up by 1 point. And now there's 2 people tied at 7, and he's in.
All right. The candidates have been retallied. The revised verdict is Mr. Carey has a total of 17 points. He's still in number 1. There's no longer a three-way tie, and there is a clear second person, and that is Mr. Theodore Stehney, and he has 8 points. Okay? All right. Should we, may I have a motion to accept this slate? May I have a motion to accept a second? Any question? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign? Motion was made by Commissioner and State Attorney Ehrenberg and seconded by, I think, Cridell, and motion carried unanimously. I'll be glad to make a phone call to Mr. Carey. This is the last meeting that we will have together as an entire committee, which includes, of course, the State Attorney and the Public Defender, with our current Inspector General, Cheryl Steckler. I'd like to offer her the floor to say some words to us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First to Public Defender Howard, you and I started this together, and it's a bittersweet moment for me. To all of you that have joined since that time, you are a remarkable group. I know you will do well. I hope I have served you well as the public. I will be here till the end of June, but as the Chair has said, this will be our last time together. You have chosen well. I'm very excited of the applicants that we had, and you've got a great number 1 and number 2, and I think the public will be proud.
I hope so. Thank you so much for your work, and we still will spend time together as a commission. Thank you. Thank you, public, for being here. We appreciate your support, and we will now announce it to Mr. Carey. May I please have a motion to adjourn? Second, I don't know who moved it or who second. Carey moved it. Who second? Okay, that sounds good. We have a two-way tie of seconded, but it's done by Mr. Peoria, and we have a unanimous. So have a great afternoon.